Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leadership and Culture First, where we discuss the complexities of leadership and culture, but also offer solutions to aspiring and new and experienced leaders. We invite guests to share their knowledge and experience and ask those challenging questions. As coaches, we aim to provide real insights, enable reflection, and challenge your thinking. Join us on our mission to unleash your leadership potential. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Michelle Knight with us. Michelle's an executive coach, an inclusive leadership expert, and founder of Transforming Her Work. A former legal director and EDI board member, she understands what it takes to rise to senior leadership in systems where inclusion isn't guaranteed. She now works with organisations ready to move beyond tick box EDI, helping them build inclusive leadership pipelines, develop confident, high-performing leaders, and turn culture into a measurable driver of performance and purpose. At the heart of her work is behaviour change, coaching leaders to shift how they lead so they can elevate their own performance, strengthen team performance, and deliver measurable organisational impact and profit. Sounds absolutely great, Michelle. So this is going to be this sounds really exciting. So can you just start by telling us how you got to where you are and why?
How long have you got?
Okay,
Um,
right. I'll start my watch.
I started out a long time ago. In fact, I'll go further back. As a child,
Yeah.
I decided that I wasn't going to bed and I was going to watch LA Law, which I absolutely loved. And decided from that, I loved the shoulder pads. I was going to become a lawyer. 10 years later, I did. And then I started in a small high street practice and went all the way to an international law firm. And I practiced for 20 years, leading a national team around regeneration and redevelopment of properties to bring people up, help them to rise. And I loved it. And then the last couple of years have 3 boys with my husband and thought, actually, it's time for a new direction. And where do I go from here? And I experienced coaching, absolutely loved it. It was transformational for me. And I thought, actually, I want to do it for others and I want to bring other people on that journey. And it's strange to say, but I love the corporate space. I love organizations. And I think it has the power, especially from a social mobility point, to transform people's lives. And it transformed mine in terms of the ability to be able to earn, buy a home and all the rest of that jazz. And I thought that's where I want to help. I want to take some of my lived experiences and others that I know and support others in their leadership journey in the corporate space.
Lovely. Wow. So that's what led you into the coaching then, I guess, isn't it? That real
Yes.
wish to help other people. So tell us a little bit more about your transforming her work then.
Well, I think the essence of it is the whole idea, and I started off coaching women who were in middle leadership and senior leadership positions with the idea that they needed a particular type of support to get them where they needed to go to. And that was in part based on my own experiences, the whole idea of confidence, stepping out, being visible. I was very much, and many of the women that I know in terms of my generation, if I can call that, we worked extremely hard, both at work and at home, but we weren't necessarily the first people to put our hands up for opportunities. And there wasn't necessarily the sponsor putting their hand up for us either. And I thought, okay, this is something that needs to change. So I was coaching around that. And my goal was all about women.
Mm.
But the more that I coached women, I realized that there was a systemic issue here around, it wasn't the individual woman. She may have had her little positives and negatives, but there was a system at play. And I thought, actually, I need to go from not only working with women, but those who are in leadership who can actually have impact on as to how women lead and how women rise. So I sticked with the theme of transforming her work, but now I actually work with coaching with men who are in senior leadership positions, who have influence over inclusion, and also women and underrepresented groups who need support to understand how the organisation works, how they can bring about that change, that transformation for them personally, and how they can then rise in that organisation. And I always hope that as they rise, they have a hand behind them pulling somebody up.
Mm, absolutely. And what is it then about that systemic thing. I've said call it a thing because I don't know what it
And
is, so I'm calling it a thing.
I think in principle, the systems are the rules that govern an organisation. And I won't look at it from a societal
Yeah.
perspective because that's quite different in terms of how we work as a society. But in terms of an organisation, it has an ecosystem, it has an identity, and it has rules as to how you work within that organisation and what the expectations are around you moving up an organisation. And the systems, I think you're right to call it a thing because it is actually intangible. You may have a model or an ethos that they have saying, if you work for us, this is about us, this is our statement, our mission statement, and so forth. That is something that you can see and you can embrace. But the things that actually underlie how an organization works, which is actually the culture, is unseen and is intangible and is a thing.
Mm.
And so I help people to understand what is the system that's at play at their workplace and how do they use it to their advantage to progress. And it's not about manipulation, but for a lot of people, we're brought up with the concept of your performance, meritocracy is enough, that you work hard, you show up to the boss, and you will be promoted. But what we discovered, and I think it's widely reported, that that isn't actually the case, that being good is not good enough. And so if you look at that and think, well, actually, if I have been in this role for 2, 3+ years and there's no evidence that I'm moving up, what else is going on around me that I can't see, that I don't understand, that I need to embrace? Not because I want to run away from the organization, but because I need to understand how I move forward here. And I think
Mm.
that's the thing. It's very bespoke to a particular organization. And it's not a one size fits all for systems. It's understanding what's going on at play in your particular workplace. And once you understand that, you can get a breakthrough.
So what kinds of things then would people need to kind of think about within their organisation then to help them understand that better?
I think first and foremost, it is being aware, the awareness that there will be a system at play, and actually just watching. If I think back to my own personal career to give you some examples, one of the things that we were taught as trainee lawyers is you get in early, you work hard, you then go to the bar or pub at night, and then you come back the next morning and you start all over again. Now that seems like most people would say, well, that's slightly outside of your 9 to 5, but you're a young person, that's what you need to do. And that's how I used to see it, that it was simply a case that that's how you worked. What I didn't understand was the system underneath it, which was that if you showed up early at 7, you could have a coffee with the boss and get to know them on a personal level. When you was in the bar in the evening, it was about those leveraging relationships, understanding how the workplace works from a relationship perspective. And in between, it was a little bit about law.
Mm. That's really
And I think
interesting.
with that, I think it opens your mind. So you have to look at your workplace through new lens. And unfortunately, I don't have a book out yet. Maybe I should write a book.
Maybe you
I don't
should.
have like a 10-point plan. That's what that wants coaching to understand for
Yes.
them. But it's opening your eyes as to what's going on around you, and maybe a case of shadowing somebody who's more senior than you to actually see what they do as their feet are under the table.
So I guess it's a bit of that mentoring. Does mentoring come into it as well, or is it more about shadowing and observing?
I think at a first stage, it's about shadowing and observing and having those mentoring conversations. But I think because I come from the inclusivity mindset, not everybody has mentors, not everybody has ability to obtain a mentor or sponsorship. So therefore, to level the playing field, there's got to be other ways that they can access the information. That information that is intangible.
Mm.
And so it's about how do you get support maybe from others in your cohort or friendship circles or external organizations that maybe have more experience in that can support you. And also reading. You'll be amazed if people picked up a book on organizational change and
Yeah,
leadership, how much information they could distill that would support them.
absolutely. Can I just take you back to the inclusivity in terms of culture? What are, in your view, what we're getting right and what we're getting wrong?
I think personally that it's not about this person is right and this person is wrong. We need to get to a place that we accept that everybody comes to the workplace from a different background. And I don't mean literal in terms of their social background. I mean what could have actually happened to them this morning, and allowing people to be human. So I might come in today and be the smiley boss. The next day, I might have I've done it before, got wet in the rain, and I start the working day in a bit of a huff. If that person was to come into my office in that moment in my huff, I may say something that I would regret. But the day before, smiling the shower would have been okay. So it's about my inclusivity idea is the whole concept that people are human.
Mm.
And so you can't automatically make decisions based on what happens in one moment, one interaction. And it's more about data gathering and understanding people's concepts. And then you can get a pattern, and then you can use that in terms of its inclusivity of how you bring people forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what the word that always really interests me is equality. And when you ask some people what equality means, it's, oh, it's treating people equally. But that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Like you said, it's about appreciating people as individuals, isn't it? Regardless of all the things you've just talked about.
I think it is. I think it's about accepting people's difference. You know, I could have the same kind of traits as another person sitting next to me. Another black woman could be sitting next to me, and people could say, "Well, actually, you're equal." In the way that you carry yourself, the way that you look, and so forth. But our experiences could be wholly different. So I think it's really about treating every person and accepting their difference. And also for the things that you can't see, difference is not just gender, race, etc. It's neurodiversity, it's social mobility. There's so many things. And every human that walks into the workplace does so with all of that information upon them. And also, depending on what the evening was like, the footy was like, they come in with all this other stuff as well. So it's really about accepting difference, whether you can see it or not, but however they choose to want to be presenting to you. And also, I think it's inclusivity is not just a nice to have. I think for far too long, we've looked at equality, diversity, and inclusion in the concept of let's be fair. And yes, we've had race relations acts. Yes, we've had some progress, but we haven't had transformation in the workplace. And so, what I talk about in terms of inclusivity is this whole concept of performance and profit, and that difference. If you allow it to be in your workplace and allow people to feel they have a safe space to actually share their opinions and bring their background to the forefront, you'll unlock profitability, simple things like through retention, because they'll be happier, but also that you will have a competitive edge compared to your competitors because you're bringing all the opinions into your space, into your scope of work.
Absolutely. It is about that kind of rich tapestry, to use that sort of term, isn't it? Of all those small parts coming together to make that bigger sort of picture. Do you find what do you find is the kind of the biggest thing that your clients, your coaching clients might bring to you as their challenges to do with anything inclusivity?
Um, I spend a lot of time speaking to senior leaders who are either in the C-suite or just below, who are budget holders. And as humans, they just don't want to get it wrong. They tend to be of a particular. They tend to be men who are in senior positions, and they have wives, nieces, and all the rest of it, and they think about the context of what should I be saying to this individual to support their development, which may be uncomfortable to me and to them. But also, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So, what support do I need in terms of, we've got this whole thing about language at the moment, which has been played out in the news even in the last 24 hours about language. And so they wonder, what should I say? How should I say it? The tone of what I say? And also, I want to get it right first time. And I have to talk to them about this whole idea of going on a journey and also about self-acceptance, that you who gets it right all the time? I personally don't, with every relationship that I have. And so I think that behavioral change of accepting that you may get things wrong, but in the context of a wider relationship that you have with the individual, enables them to move forward and have the difficult conversations and transform what the individuals in their team are doing, how they're doing it, and bring about success for their team.
Mm. No, that really makes sense. What do you think then are the general challenges for those sorts of senior leaders? If you were going to be a more junior leader and you wanted to think, okay, what are their challenges? What do I need to prepare myself for? What do you think they are?
Um, a lot of leaders that I speak to, in terms of their day-to-day life in the workplace, they have it, how can I say, unlocked. They know what the day job requires. They know what it means to perform in their particular role. So in terms of strategy, in terms of connections, in terms of targets that they need to hit for them and their team, and the technical stuff that they need, I do not even begin to engage with them on that level, because they know what they need to do. That's how they got to that position. And I would say to somebody who's aspiring to go to that position, understand and lock down the technical abilities that you need to thrive in that role. When they're in the position, it becomes more about having safe spaces to test out their ideas, and confidential spaces that they can do that. Because when you are a senior leader, it actually is quite a lonely position to be in. You don't have people knocking your door, emailing you saying, "Would you like to come to lunch today?" Or if they do, it's usually because they want something from you.
Right.
So having that space to kind of unpack what they're thinking becomes a really important ability that they have. And also, I would say, emotional intelligence. So this is again about the intangibles. It's about, how do you understand what is going on around you when only the person is only giving you the information verbally, which is only worth 7%. So what is their behavior like? What is their body language like? What is their history like at the organization? And having that kind of holistic view of individuals, senior leaders have to be really good at that, and they have to be able to do it quickly. So I think it's more about, as you're moving up, you get the technical skills, but once you're there, and if you start early, you need to have the intangible skill set to be able to lead an
Mm.
organization and lead people.
Yeah, because we see it time and time again, don't we? But very capable people are promoted into roles because of their technical skills, their experience, and then suddenly something changes. And I think particularly if you're promoted within a team or within an organisation, you're viewed differently to start with. And sometimes I think we forget that those senior leaders are humans too. To go back to your,
Yeah.
original point. Um, so it's how do we enable those individuals who are in those senior leadership positions to manage that, and all those things around that you've just talked about, emotional intelligence, really important. I guess, is it about understanding self more as well?
I would say so. I think it's, whenever you get a promotion, it's always a journey. And I think uh, senior leaders have an assumption that by the time they get to that particular position, they should have mastered it all and they should be able to do it all. But that is highly unlikely. You know, you step up, and all the issues that you have step up as well in terms of what you're expected to deal with. And so I think it's about unpacking and having time for yourself. And that's why I think it's the importance of the coaching space, because you can do that with somebody in a guided way, which is private and separate to your organization, and support you on that journey as you make the changes that you need to do, and you reveal and understand yourself that you need to do to get you where you want to go for you and your team.
Yeah. So what then would you say to those organisations who are, well, most, let's face it, if you're not looking for either impact or profit or both, then not sure what you're doing as an organisation. But what would you uh, say to the very senior leader in that organisation about supporting their team?
I would say to them, on a human level, we all know it's important. We all know about well-being. And it's the same thing that I said about inclusivity. We all know this already, but it doesn't seem to be changing the dial, it doesn't seem to be changing the conversation. So I tend to lead with, if you invest in your people in terms of well-being and support, that leads to transformation, which leads to profit and measurable performance of your staff. And that tends to prick up the ears and start a conversation about, well, actually, what's the return on investment if I invest in so many individuals in this workplace? How do I see that in a tangible benefit for my organization moving forward? That tends to work more. And I personally, when I used to as I said, I worked at an international firm and I sat on the EDI board internationally. And I'd have conversations with the leaders in Australia, in America, South Africa, as well as in the UK. And we'd be talking about EDI. And some people, depending on the legislation that was in their particular country, would be like, well, that's irrelevant to me. We don't have those laws. And even though you may have spoke about it from a fairness perspective, it was always back to the same thing. I don't have to do it, so I won't do it because it's too hard to do. But when you turn the conversation and said, actually, you could get a 3% increase in your budget if you do this, you could get better staffing if you do this, you could transform your culture, be less headache for you in how the organization is run as the MD if you embrace this, that tended to get the conversation moving.
Absolutely. And it's really sad, isn't it? Because I think that then goes back to your point around um, all of these things in place, but we're still not getting it right. So that attitude of we don't have to do it, so why would we? Without
Mm.
really thinking about the benefits of doing something. Because equally, in lots of organisations you will have seen, there's policies and processes for, I don't know, agile working, for all sorts of, well-being initiatives, but you don't always see that in action.
Hmm.
So it's all very well having that policy, isn't it? But so what? You've got a policy. Well done, you. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I remember being a lawyer, and if you left at 5:30, people just said bye. Nobody really said anything to you. But if you were still there at 7, the boss got pizzas and you carried on working and you had pizza and you kind of got to connect with your staff. And the reason why I say that is because you need to understand what's going on at your organization. You need
Mm.
to understand what the temperament is of the people that you work with. And you need to find ways of moving people forward in terms of where they want to go. And I say that because if you don't share the pizza story with everybody in the organization, so they've got an equal opportunity to be included in that, when it comes to promotion, you will automatically see, and it's proven in terms of research, that the person that you spend the time with, bond with, develop with, and work alongside is more likely to be promoted than the person that you barely know. But if you don't have that time to invest in the individual by saying, well, actually, if you hang around tonight and do the pizza chat with us, do some extra hours with us, that will unlock that individual and bring benefits for them and for you as you move forward.
Absolutely. But isn't it? I kind of think, it's all that questioning. Yes, you're being rewarded for doing more hours, because, the pizza story thing. But then why? That's almost making staff feel like they have to do that to get anywhere. And if you've got any kind of caring responsibilities or disability that means you can't work those longer hours, you're being disadvantaged, aren't you?
I think so. I think you are. And I think it also depends on your organization,
Mm.
because some professions, like law, it's called chargeable hours. So the more
Okay.
hours that you do, the more benefit it is to the organization,
Yeah.
even though you've got contractual hours, which is something completely different. But I think also that comes back to the whole culture thing and seeing what's going on around you. And if that culture doesn't fit you, then you have the agency to say, actually, is this something that's going to change or possibly could change? And if not, is this something where I want to be or don't want to be? And I think that's something that's empowering, because sometimes if you stay in a system that's you clearly realize is not going to work for you, and you don't have the power to change that, then you're better off, I would say, in the realistic world, rather than trying to take on the organization that's unlikely to change because that's how they've always done things. Instead, you're better off moving to an organization that will support you the way you need to be supported to bring forward your career. And the reverse side of that is, if you are a senior leader in that organization and you see that you have issues around retention, i.e., your talent pipeline is going through the door because they don't want to do the pizza conversation, they don't want to work those hours, then that's when you need to move from policy to behavioral change as a CEO or whoever you are as a senior leader, to ensure that you can get the right staff in and the culture fits the generation or the individuals that you would like to have at your organization.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really liberating for those individuals as well, thinking, actually, no, the power is mine. And I mean that power in a good
Yeah.
way. The power is mine to make decisions about my life. But again, I think it takes a really insightful senior leader to see what's happening. Do they actually? Because I mean, there are some amazing leaders out there, but we also know, you hear all the time of those senior leaders who don't see what's happening in their organisation.
I think so. And I think that's where it's really important that you do things like the staff surveys, that you actually have a conversation with your HR team who can drill down the data. So you might not see that your pizza conversations in the late night is leading to a retention issue. But what you could see from the data is a particular grade of employee gets so far and then they drop off, or a particular percentage of people aren't passing their probation period. So you begin to inquire and explore the data that you have, which doesn't, for me, should not require self-reflection, because you're just looking at it as a factual piece of work. What is the data showing me around pipeline and retention in my organization? And if you uncover an issue, then you get the right supports to kind of unpack it further. And hopefully, if you meet somebody like me, or somebody else who's in culture management and cultural change and organizational change, they will then start having a conversation with you about behavioral change that could improve that data for that
Mm.
organization.
Absolutely. It's sitting and looking and observing, looking at the data, all of those things. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. One thing that we do on this podcast, Michelle, is that we ask every guest to provide a question for the next guest. Oh, deep
Okay.
breath. Okay. And obviously, the guests don't know who the next person's going to be. So
Yeah.
sometimes it might feel really off the wall, and other times it might not. But the question I've got for you today, posed by our previous guest, and it's a real cultural question, I guess. So,
Okay.
in this era of online and remote working, how do you make sure that you retain the culture and engagement of your staff?
Ooh, I really like that question.
Hmm.
Read it to me again,
Okay.
please.
That's okay. In this era of online and remote working, how do you make sure that you retain the culture and engagement of your staff?
I think the first thing to say is there has been a culture shift. We had the pandemic, and at that time, most people predominantly worked in the workplace, and overnight we went home working. And now each organization has its own version of what that hybrid working tends to look like for the remote workers. And some people 100% work from home. And I give that kind of context because I wanted to say, you set the dial of what that culture looks like. We can't hark back to what culture was before the pandemic, because everybody now has their own kind of understanding. Like, I had friends who worked in the city. The pandemic hit, they liked working at home and they decided to move into the countryside because they thought, I want a different lifestyle, but I still want to be able to do my day job and I can do it from home. So people have moved And so your culture has to move to adapt to them. So you can set it. If you're the leader asking that question, it would suggest to me that you have the ability to transform what the culture is. And I would say the way you go about it is you involve the others, you include them in that conversation. I remember when I naively thought, okay, on a Monday morning, we will have kind of Zoom chats with my whole team. And I set them for like water cooler moments so they could join me on Zoom. And I thought we were going to get the most riveting conversations. It'd be really rich and empowering. They all came because I think they felt like they should come. I don't really like should, but I think that's what they felt.
Yeah.
But as the weeks went by, less and less people would turn up. And sometimes I was on that call on my own and thinking, I have no idea what those individuals are doing. They obviously don't want to be here with me, and that is all right. I have to accept that they don't. They are remote working, and I don't know what they're delivering because I can't see them. I can't ask the question. So where does that leave me sitting in my leadership? What do I do? Do I become more autonomous and demand that they join these calls? Or do I become flexible and wait and see? And so I decided, because in law, we have chargeable hours, so I can get the data to see how much people are delivering, how many hours they've worked, how much they've billed. And I thought, I'm going to sit on the data. And I was really surprised that allowing people to be at home and not have the water cooler moment with me like I wanted them to have, they actually performed better by me giving them the flexibility to work how they wanted to work. And so I became more about asking them, what's best for you? What works for you? What do you need? Rather than assuming that I had to set the culture for the team. It was more about, I didn't say to them, help me set the culture. It was me asking them, how can I get this organization to work for you, how you want to work, so that we get the benefit as a team and the wider performance for the organization. And so I would say personally, in a time of remote working, you need to decide with your team what remote working looks like for you, and you help alongside your team building a culture that works, that still delivers for the organization, and you have the data to back it up from a HR perspective or your own senior leaders, but you allow your team to be flexible in how they do their remote working, because they might be doing the nursery run, they might have other care responsibilities, they might want to cook at lunchtime and have a slightly longer lunch break. There's so many different things that people might want to do, and I suppose that's the whole idea back to inclusion.
Mm.
Inclusion with data that works is a much better place for you and for your team.
And then leads to retention, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, it does.
absolutely. And I think, because I think we're seeing in the news regularly that this, I don't know, this organisation, this bank, this business has decided to call all their staff back into the office. And I always question, well, why is that? What is it that you're not trusting about your staff that they can or can't do their job? Do you know what I mean? There's a
Mm,
bit of that issue of trust for me. Um, and like you say, if somebody can get the work done in 5 hours instead of 6, then marvelous. The next day they may work 8 hours to do
yeah.
something else. So it's also about trust, isn't it?
I think so. And I think that is really important. Trust in the relationships that you have with your colleagues at work. And also I personally like to give everybody the opportunity to thrive.
Mm.
So if they believe that they can thrive by working 5 hours one day, 8 hours the next day, and when I get the data at the end of the month, it supports that what their delivery requirements were for that month, they've been able to do it with that working pattern. Who am I to complain?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. No, that's really, really great answer. Well done, Michelle. Super. Thank you. It wasn't a test, but So, what's your question for the next guest?
Um, I really like emotional intelligence, and it's one of the things that I deeply want to understand. So my question is going to be, how can senior leaders use emotional intelligence not just to connect well, but to drive performance and culture.
That's lovely. I'm also a massive fan of emotional intelligence, so it's really great that I'm going to ponder. I'm going to reflect on that question myself, I think. And I invite all our listeners to do the same. So yeah. But Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I can't believe the time has flown by so
It really
quickly.
has.
Is there anything else that any other words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on before we wrap up today?
I think if I was new in early careers or a middle manager of some sort, and I was thinking, how do I rise? One of the things that has been on my mind recently, and I think you said it on this call, was about power and using it the right way. And I think going back to that point of what is it that you need to do to progress and to rise in an organization? And I would say that power and influence, embedding it in yourself and taking ownership that you have power and that you have the ability to leverage that power with others for your benefit without manipulating others, will really put you in a good stead for promotion. And then I hope that once you go up the ladder and you see what is possible with exercising power, that you exercise it well for other people that are behind you.
Oh, that absolutely super, and that brings us back to that, always having that hand for the person behind you. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. I hope you've all enjoyed listening to us today. If you have, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we look forward to you joining us again. Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Michelle. Cheers.
Thank you.